Welcome to the channel. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can look at a picture and draw your own plans. Now, this is beneficial because you might not be able to find the plans you need for the project you're building. If you do find plans, there's a chance you might need to modify them for your specific project or space. It also just saves you money. The other thing I want to point out is if you're newer at woodworking, it's really good to go through these steps because once you get more seasoned after doing this kind of thing, you can look at a picture and say, I know how it goes together. Let me draw it out. If you are super new and you're looking at building something really complex, we're going to go over like the basics. If you are new and you're thinking about like building a workbench or something complex like that, or a Pennsylvania spice chest or whatever those are called, those you might want to get plans for or save them for later when you get more experience under your belt. But I'm going to take you guys through 6 different steps to show you how to go through the plan. So the first thing we're going to look at is your absolute numbers, the numbers that cannot get any smaller. I'll show you why. How the base is going to attach to the sides, what board dimensions they're going to be, what jointery you want to use, the length of the boards, and then how you figure out what list to take with you to go to the shop and buy the boards. So the first thing is the absolute numbers. Those are like the whole point of the project. So for a napkin holder, the whole point of this project is to hold napkins. So measure your napkins. We're going to say, for example, that these are 6 by 6 napkins. This number cannot get smaller. Star it, smiley face it, square it, circle it, whatever you want to do to tell yourself, do not make these smaller. Because if my napkins are 6 by 6 and I finish building the holder and it's 5 by 5, it's not holding your napkins anymore. Same thing goes if you're building like a DVD shelf thing. You measure the height of your DVDs. If you make that height too short when your project is done, it won't hold your DVDs. So keep that in mind. I highly recommend drawing these first for that reason. The next thing you want to do is actually draw it out. If you want to, you can draw it to scale using different measurements on the side. You can count out the different squares. That's really helpful if you're trying to get a visual of how something will aesthetically look. For example, building a 6 by 6 napkin holder, if I make these sides 1 inch, they're going to look super beefy on a little tiny napkin holder. So if you're newer, I'd recommend counting out the squares, using numbers, using a measuring tape, something like that to draw it to scale. So we add in our absolute numbers here, 6 by 6. Again, square them, star them, something like that. They cannot get smaller. They can get bigger if you wanted to leave a little bit of room and not have a cutout, yada, yada. Next, draw the frame around it. From here, some people like to jump right into joinery. You can-ish. The first thing that I recommend looking at is how you're going to have the bottom of this napkin holder attached to the sides. And there's multiple ways to do that. These are just some examples. You could attach it directly to the bottom like that. You could have it slide into a groove. You could have it rest on a lip. You could have it go under a lip. These 2 methods right here are okay if you're not doing anything that's going to hold something heavy. So for a napkin holder, I'm perfectly fine using these examples. So let's go ahead and go with this one here. So it's a little bit more complex than just attaching it to the bottom, because I always like when people get to practice jointery on simple projects like this. That just went away. There we go. Okay. So now we know that we are going to go with this type of attachment where this is going to be the outside of our boards. This is going to be the bottom of the napkin holder. So now I need to figure out how thick do I want this to be. Now keep in mind, the thickness of this board right here is what you're going to see from the top of the napkin holder. So I want this to be 1/2 inch because aesthetically that would look right to me, and you don't need anything beefy to hold napkins. Now that you know that this is 1/2 inch, you already know what these measurements are going to be, okay? Because this is going to be 1/4 inch and this is going to be 1/4 inch. So save those numbers for later. All right, so thickness of the board, let's go ahead and just figure that out now. Basically, how many napkins do you want it to hold? And I'm going to say, I don't know, 5 inches, okay? So take a stack of napkins, measure them, and figure it out that way. Don't stress on that part, really. All right, so now we have our board dimensions. Let's go ahead and move on to the jointery. This is where you figure out what kind of jointery you want to do. And keep in mind, whatever selection you made here could affect the jointery you chose. If you're newer, give yourself time and go through the thought process of this. For example, if you're going to do dovetails and you chose to go with this joinery, you'll have to pay attention where the tail and the pin and stuff goes to make sure that this doesn't show on the outsides of those dovetails. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're newer, just go with one of the simple joints. So we are going to go ahead and go with just T-joints. I never remember what they're called. You guys can yell at me down below. But basically it's going to look like this. Like that. Okay? Well, that. So for that, and knowing that we already know how thick our boards are going to be, it's going to be half inch, all the way around. Okay? So now going off of our absolute numbers, we have 6, and this is going to be a long board. So this long board is going to include the 6, but it's also going to include the thicknesses of these boards. So we have to take 6 plus a half, that gives you 7. So we know our long boards are going to be 7 inches long. For the short boards, it's only going to be this absolute number because we don't need to add anything on. They're cut off. So those are going to be 6 inches. So now we know we need 2 boards that are 7 inches long and 2 boards that are 6 inches long. Now, because we already figured out the board dimensions, we know that they need to be 5 inches thick and that they need, 5 inches wide, and that they need to be half an inch thick. So that right there, that's your cut list for the boards. Now, to figure out this piece right here, if you're going to go get a piece of plywood, if you're going to try to use real wood, whatever it needs to be, you know that because of this jointery, you have this 1/4 inch that it's going to go into these outside boards. So 1/4 inch here, whoop, that's a half, 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch, all the way around. Okay? Take your absolute numbers, add a 1/4 inch, add a 1/4 inch. So it's going to be 6.5, same thing, 6, 1/4 inch by 6.5. Now, I highly recommend waiting to cut any board to this size. If you're going to the store, buy one, give yourself a buffer. Buy one that's 7 by 7. Because once you build this and assemble it, if it's a little bit off and you cut this too short, you're going to have to buy another board. So save the cutting of this dimension till later, but it's good to figure out what this is so you can go buy something just slightly bigger and give yourself that buffer. All right, so now that we've got our board sizes, now the last step is to actually go buy the lumber, but they're not going to sell you 6-inch boards and 7-inch boards. The best thing to do is go buy a long board. So to figure that out, you take these numbers and multiply them. So 6 by 2, 12, 7 by 2, 14. Add those together. That gives you 26 inches. So we know that the board needs to be at least 26 inches by 5 inches wide by half an inch thick. That right there is what you take to the store. So to give yourself the buffer, just buy a 3-foot board that's 5 inches wide and half an inch thick. The other option is to buy a 2-foot board that's 12 inches wide and half an inch thick. So you'd have to go and see which one's shorter because then you can rip this down to 5 and 5. All right, so I hope this helped you guys out. Just remember the main points. Your absolute numbers, how the base is going to go into the project or the backer. It's the same thing if you're building a box. How does that drawer bottom go into it? What your board dimensions are going to be, what jointery you're going to choose, what boards you need to pick, and then how you do the math to go to the store and buy them. If you guys have any questions, any comments, anything like that, feel free to let us know down below. If you use a different method, let us know that as well. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something, and have a good day.